Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It's Monday, April 21st. We come on the air with breaking news. Pope Francis has passed away. The Vatican made the announcement early this morning saying the 88-year-old Bishop of Rome returned to the house of the Father. Just yesterday, Francis made a surprise public appearance to bless thousands of people in St. Peter's Square. He then drove through the Piazza, the Pope Mobile. The Pope had been recovering from pneumonia. He was in the hospital for 5 weeks and was discharged less than a month ago. MSNBC's Chris Jansing has a look back at his life and legacy.
Francis, the pastor, gathering excited children on the Pope Mobile, ever the warm and humble priest he showed the world the day he was elected in 2013.
Facciamo in silenzio.
Asking for prayers, dressed in a simple white cassock and an iron cross, not the traditional gold. No surprise from a man who is cardinal in Buenos Aires, lived in a small apartment, rode the subway, and cooked his own meals.
He could understand regular people. I'm an ordinary person, an ordinary guy with an extraordinary job. And I think that the message was, I am one of you.
But then surprising many as Pope by bluntly taking on controversial causes, speaking out against the invasion of Ukraine, criticizing those who wouldn't wear masks during the pandemic, calling couples who had pets instead of children selfish, and as the first pope to address a joint session of Congress, challenging the U.S. to open its arms to refugees and abolish the death penalty. Even earlier, just months after his election, saying something revolutionary for a Catholic Church leader, that the Church must welcome the LGBTQ community.
If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge?
It's the Pope saying something that no other Pope has said, not only in terms of the implications of that statement, but the very willingness to speak with such kind of spontaneity and ease on a grave matter to reporters at the back of a plane.
By that December, Time magazine and The Advocate named Francis their Person of the Year. He made the cover of Rolling Stone, Fortune's list of the most powerful people in the world. And he was the first, as pontiff, to have an Instagram account, gaining 1 million followers in the first 12 hours. He was born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the eldest of 5 children of Italian immigrants. As a young man, holding jobs as a bouncer, a janitor, and studying chemistry before entering the seminary. When Pope Benedict retired, Bergoglio was seen as a cardinal whose time had passed, and at 76, too old. But after 5 ballots, white smoke. The first Jesuit ever elected pope, the first from Latin America, and the first in nearly 600 years to follow a retirement. A story so dramatic, Hollywood couldn't resist.
You have lifted a great burden from my shoulders.
You're placed in every one of mine.
Francis took over a church with 1.3 billion members deeply divided over abortion, divorce, the ordination of women, and married priests.
He came into the church at a time in which there was tremendous crisis, both internally and externally, in terms of its reputation. And he, in a sense, rebranded the Catholic Church. At a time when the church really needed a facelift, he provided it.
He expanded roles for women in parishes and at the Vatican, but didn't budge on making them priests. Considered allowing married priests in remote areas, but ultimately didn't. And reaffirmed many times church teaching against abortion. Conservative Catholics argue Francis prioritized pastoral openness and outreach at the expense of church doctrine.
Since our main work in the church is preparing people and calling people to heaven, we need to be able to tell them, no, that's sinful conduct that will get you barred from going in the door.
Other critics question whether his moves to toughen church laws dealing with sexual abuse by priests went far enough. But with his appointment of 21 new and diverse cardinals in 2022, Francis further shaped a church leadership tilting more toward the developing world, and one that's more inclusive, willing to at least talk about tough issues.
Pope Francis understood that this was a world experiencing a lot of hurt,
And that hurt was of such a magnitude that it needs a divine healing.
When failing health led to rumors of retirement, the Pope, who once ministered to the poor in the slums of Buenos Aires, said simply, "Leave a legacy of good, not just goods," as he had done himself, washing the feet of prison inmates, embracing the sick, and shining a light on the Catholic mission of love and mercy.
Wow, we have so much to talk about here in terms of the legacy of Pope Francis, Richard Haass, Jonathan Lemire, Joe and me starting off the show, and we're lining up guests as this breaking news unfolds before our eyes. And Joe, Pope Francis, the things that stand out to me was first just living by example, the simplicity of his life, even when he could have the comforts around him of anything of his choosing. He chose to live so simply with a focus on the humanity of all people, even and especially the poor. Also, his focus on inclusivity, his outreach to marginalized communities. Those words, "Who am I to judge?" will echo throughout his legacy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And I was just going to say, and many on the hard right inside the church were shocked that this Pope would actually borrow from Jesus Christ and living that simple life. Borrow from Jesus Christ. And they were radical words when he said it. And it was like, it was sounded like the shot of a cannon. It just stunned everybody when the Pope said, "Who am I to judge?" Now, why in the world would he say something that radical? I don't know. Maybe it's because that's exactly what Jesus said to the woman at the well when religious leaders were going to stone her to death. And Jesus said, as they dropped their rocks after saying, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone," Jesus turned and said, "Where are your accusers now?" Well, I also don't accuse you. Go and sin no more. And that's the thing, Mika, his legacy was remarkable in that Jesus reached out to those who were shunned by religious leaders in society, the lepers, the tax collectors, the sinners like the woman at the well. And with Francis, conservatives, many conservatives inside the church hated him for being Christ-like in that respect. Just as the religious leaders of his day hated Jesus, but Francis was one bowed and being inclusive while following the word of the Gospels. Many on the left were also disappointed, as we heard in Chris's package, that often his words would not lead to changing church doctrine. But even that approach mirrored Jesus, who did save the woman at the well, said he held no judgment toward her, and then said, "Go and sin no more." Pope Francis understood the importance of opening wide the doors of the church to everybody, to those who were judged, to those that Jesus opened his faith to. And it really was, Mika, it really was really radical for the time in which he lived. And now the big question is, moving forward, which direction does this church go back to? Does it go back to a legacy of doctrine and law over love and inclusivity? We will see how much of an impact Francis really did have on the long-term shape and direction of this church.